with us. My name is Katharine Menendez de la Cuesta. I'm a partner of Holland & Knight based in Miami. And it is my great honor to moderate this panel today about something that is not only current, but critical in today's world, ethics and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a powerful tool that we cannot get rid of. It's here and it's here to stay. So as I was saying, artificial intelligence is here. It's a powerful tool. It's here to stay. We cannot get rid of it. But with it, we've seen many challenges, and many of them are of ethical nature. We've seen many advantages. For example, making justice is probably now more accessible, is possible. Is cheaper, and artificial intelligence is providing opportunities to some people around the world that are invaluable and were not existent before or not possible. Artificial intelligence also improves efficiency, it brings down costs. We've seen that it accelerates or may accelerate research and development. So there are many advantages of artificial intelligence. It, however, as I said, presents challenges. Often those challenges are ethical in nature, and we've seen now that it's easier to deceive thanks to artificial intelligence. We are presented different realities. We've seen some attacks to privacy, surveillance. We've seen also some challenges related to bias, discrimination. What is the role of our own judgment? Is that going to be substituted? Is that something we want to preserve? So, multiple questions, and today I am, as I said, honored to introduce this panel with a few very experienced speakers that have had, some of them whole careers on this, and that they will tell us what they are seeing and going through from different perspectives on the topic. I'm going to start with Kanan Dhru, the very left. She's a senior lecturer, legal tech at the Hague University. She's originally from India and lives at the Hague right now. And also to my left, Vasey. She is the founder of the MeshMinds Foundation. I think living in Singapore. So thank you so much for being with us today and coming all the way to New York to discuss these topics. Later on, we're going to have some additions. Carme Artigas is the Spain Secretary of State for Digitization and Artificial Intelligence. She's going to be with us later. Also, Rodolfo Tesone, he's the president of the International Consortium for Digital Rights and Freedoms of Spain, who will give us give some words at the end too. And so we're going to start. I'm going to ask Kanan and Kate to please introduce yourselves a little bit more, and if you want, you can start by giving us a short presentation on the topic based on your own experience, please.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm going to start. My name is Kanan Dhru, and as Katharine said, I am the senior lecturer legal tech at the Hague University. So part of my work is to coordinate teaching and a minor around artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and I work also at Leiden University in The Hague, teaching also cybersecurity. My background has been in access to justice and also using digitalization and offline tools to make sure that people understand about laws and rights in simplified way. So I had my own organization that was invested in by the Dutch agency, which is where I did a lot of impact investing in some of the countries in Africa and MENA and in legal tech, and now I teach at The Hague. So that is in a nutshell. In terms of artificial intelligence and ethics, it's a fascinating topic to be talking about, and I really look forward to an interactive session. I'll start with my presentation itself for the 5 minutes and then pass on the mic if that is okay. To start with some of my opening remarks is that I was thinking, what does it mean to have the words ethics and artificial intelligence in the same breath? And what kind of dilemmas or questions or challenges or opportunities it implies. And then when I was kind of trying to think more about this, I came across this very interesting survey by Salesforce, which is a very prominent software company. And what Salesforce had done was to ask some of the leading IT experts across different agencies on how they see the impact of generative AI and the use of artificial intelligence in the world. And interestingly, as per this survey, Salesforce saw that 61% of people that were surveyed, these would include the senior IT specialists, they prefer that generative AI was one of the key kind of, tools that they will be using in the next year. And 1/3 of them saw AI and generative technologies as one of the top priorities. So that means that, and this survey was just concluded in March, a few months ago. And already we've been hearing so much about this technology, and if the senior IT leaders believe that this is going to be the top priority going forward, that means that we are just getting started. That means that the conversations around AI will have to become faster as well, and some of the questions in forums like this are imperative to be discussed. As you say, this is critical. That means that we are going to be having newer frontiers in science, in education, in how we learn, how we work, how we communicate. So things are going to change tremendously. Already it is changing as we speak, day after day. But in the same survey, something also kind of emerged, and that was that 83% of those surveyed believe that you really need to have some ethical structure, some regulation in the way this technology is used and the way it is implemented at scale. So that also kind of points to some of the challenges as you just mentioned, in terms of the privacy, in terms of the data security, in terms of the manipulation, misinformation, and the list goes, and we are all aware of this. In fact, what is interesting is that Sam Altman, who is the founder of OpenAI, one of the most prominent AI tool, ChatGPT, himself said that I'm going to be very upfront about this. Am I doing something really good or really, really bad? And that is why he's kind of going around the world talking to some of the key leaders and state leaders as well, to see how regulation around AI could look like. Because typically, and we are talking in the forum of lawyers and jurists, law reacts to new technologies. Law usually kind of catches up with how things emerge. But perhaps in the world of AI, we need to have a proactive regulation, something where the law has to kind of go a little further up than the technology, what it would look like. I think that is why we are all here today. I teach AI in EU, and the EU AI Act is one of the first regulations that has kind of been already passed by the EU Parliament, and now there's going to be a trilogue between the EU Council, Commission, and the Parliament to see if this act kind of goes through. But it has come up with a very interesting structure on the risk-based approach, looking at limited risk, high risk, and some technology around AI is completely banned as well. So that is something that is up for debate, how it is implemented, how it works, and different geographies are also proactively looking at kind of just seeing how to work with and regulate AI. UNESCO also has ethical AI guidelines, so they have 10, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in the course of the next hour. But some of the questions, and to conclude here, is that, of course we are talking about AI and ethics, and I'd love to also discuss more in the next hour, is whose ethics are we talking about here? Would it be the nation state's ethics? Would it be the corporation ethics? Would it be the citizens' ethics? And how do we make sure that that decision that algorithm has to make between the right and wrong is made for the best interest of everyone? If there is best interest of everyone, that is a question mark. And then, the world that is gearing up more and more towards a rights-based framework. But what about the duties, and where can we place duties in corporations or government, of duty of care, duty of making sure that we can create a trusted ecosystem? And I think the trust is a very important word here, and that kind of points to my last comment as to asking ourselves in terms of what kind of world we want to create. Maybe this is also an opportunity to make sure that level playing fields are created, that people have better voice, or people have more kind of frontiers open to make sure that their potential is put out fully to the world. So with that, I'm going to kind of just end my opening remarks and look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, please.
Cool, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you. I'm Kay Vasey, so I'm coming all the way from Singapore, and I'm an international technology lawyer by training. Over the last 6 years, though, I have been working directly at the intersection of art, technology, and sustainability. Every day, I work with digital creators across Asia, working on projects that protect our culture and the environment in the digital age. We are partnered with the UN, and we've done projects with Meta and Apple involving virtual reality, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence. So I come really from the perspective of the creators, and I come at it from the, I use this analogy of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we have the good. Wow, McKinsey is saying that we have a $15 trillion opportunity here. Even Deloitte is saying just for Southeast Asia alone, we have a $1 trillion opportunity by 2030. So if it's going to supercharge our creativity, if it's going to supercharge and power up our ingenuity, isn't this amazing? Isn't this an opportunity that we cannot miss? At the same time, though, what's the bad? The bad, though, here is that there have been not a Grand Theft Auto, but a Grand Theft Data, right? So that initial scraping of all of the publicly available information on the internet. So anyone here who has an Instagram page, for example, who has let their profile be open, has had their information be downloaded. Now, how do I know this for sure? I met Refik Anadol recently. He is one of the most preeminent new media artists out there. If you're interested, his work is at MoMA right now. It is called Unsupervised. It is in the free foyer of MoMA. You can go there and you can see this amazing, larger-than-life digital painting, which is all trained on the data of MoMA. Now that's great, but at the time when I met him, he also said to me, when he was creating Machine Hallucinations, New York City, he downloaded the whole of Instagram. So if you have your holiday pictures last time, etc., whatever it was, you're now part of his machine. He has used your data to train his machine. Now, at the same time, so there's lots of people up in arms about this. This is a very bad thing. This is, as I was saying, Grand Theft Data. This is how did we let this happen? At the same time, though, the ugly, we have more questions than answers at the moment. These creators want compensation, for example. How dare you take my work and put it into your machine? And now, for example, one of your data paintings is, for Refik Anadol at least, is being sold for $1 million a go. How is that even possible? How we need compensation. But in this time, we don't have the infrastructure or the systems available to help with that. How could it be that my picture goes into the machine, Katharine's picture also goes into the machine, but spits out something that is perhaps 90% mine and only 10% Katharine's? How do we know that? How do we reverse engineer to understand the output there and fairly say, oh, therefore out of the $10 that's available, I get 9, you get 1. How do we do that? How do we pick through this situation? And similarly, there is, though, unfortunately, a fundamental misunderstanding of what is actually going on with these algorithms. It's not necessarily true that if Katharine was like, hang on a minute, oh, I don't want to be paid $1. I want to take my work down. Well, we're way past that. Even if Katharine's image was not part of the data, something else that has been inspired by Katharine's painting, and perhaps Katharine herself was inspired by Van Gogh, it wouldn't make a difference, a single difference to the actual output. Because what's actually happening is that all of these people are training not what Katharine's picture of a table was and how beautiful detail of the table and what color she used, but it's just saying, this is Katharine's table. A table has a flat surface. It has 4 legs. And we use that painting in order to train the machine to know what a table is. So in the current cases that are being brought, for example, Anderson versus Stability AI, Getty Images versus Stability AI, it's very, very difficult because the outputs that they're seeing are not necessarily going to change if those inputs are taken away. So all of these are very ugly problems that we need to kind of, there's going to be a fight, but we don't have solutions to yet.
Thank you for that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Merav Shor. She is the VP and Assistant General Counsel of Emerging Tech at JP Morgan. Thank you for being here with us today. And if you could please introduce yourself a little bit longer, and you can provide your short presentation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Merav, and I'm an emerging tech lawyer at JP Morgan. My team covers digital assets, quantum computing, and most recently AI. And my focus is actually more on the digital asset side. I've come from a career working in startups, so very different organizations, smaller tech companies, mostly in the crypto space, and have only been at JP Morgan for a little over a year. So you can imagine that transition is been very interesting, and it's a very different, a lot more complex organization. I'll start just with a quick disclaimer saying that I am only sharing my own views today, and nothing should be attributable to JP Morgan, and so kind of sharing general knowledge from what I know, what I've been reading about, and nothing specific to the firm. I thought that one interesting topic to discuss today was staying on the topic of large, complicated organizations, highly regulated, especially in financial services, how they may look at this technology and potentially engage with it. And you can imagine that the processes for doing that are quite complex. I think that the first question you want to ask is why, right? What are some of the benefits? And I was thinking about this from the perspective of in-house legal teams, and it just brings in so much potential innovation and efficiency. So for lawyers to not have to spend a lot of time doing menial tasks, and being able to really focus on the big picture, the bigger tasks that require judgment. So for and there could be hundreds of use cases. So just to name a couple of examples. So to use an AI tool to be able to produce a first draft of a legal memo or an email or a policy document. Think about all the time that clears up to really focus on what's more important. Tools that can scan through databases of legal documents, classifying them, making them more easily searchable, and storing them in a way that makes sense. Scanning documents to find out whether they meet certain standards or criteria that your organization needs to comply with. So all these things can save so much time, and attorneys will not have to spend hours reading through all these documents potentially. So I think it's definitely clear that there are great benefits to this technology. However, it's important to remember that these are early days, and there are many flaws, right? We know, for example, about hallucinations. So the output of these generative AI tools can be containing information that is incorrect, right? So you can't really rely on it, or you have to verify it with external sources. There can be potential compromise to sensitive data or individuals' personal data. There could be bad actors that can trick these tools to spit out information about a third party, right? So there is a lot of privacy concerns around that, and it's not safe yet. And I think most relevant for our panel here today is the concept of biases, right? So we want to avoid incorporating any or institutionalizing any under the radar biases, especially this is important in the context of financial institutions, right? Making decisions about people's finances and who to extend a loan to, or decisions about credit, right? You want to understand how these decisions are being made, and you want to know what data is being used to train these tools. So there's just a lot of work before we can know that and be comfortable that this is safe and that it's fair. The decisions are being made in a fair way.
Absolutely. I think now we have, three very different perspectives on the topic from in different fields and industries. I think we all agree that there are clear advantages, and as I said at the beginning, it's here to stay. But at the same time, we see different challenges, and I think the three of us, and I include myself, four of us, agree there are no solutions yet. There are many questions. We are thinking about solutions. We want to implement the solutions, but it is incredibly complicated for many reasons, including that we're talking about a digital world, and regulating the world is per se complicated, right? So I would like to open it up now to comments, maybe on each other or general thoughts you may have on what we've discussed so far, and then we can go into specific questions if you agree. So I don't know, Kanan, if you want to start, or yeah?
Sure, very happy to start, and very interesting to hear the two other perspectives as well. So firstly, I'm going to react to what you said about the creative industry, and I have to be honest here. Before the ChatGPT kind of coming into use for mass, generative AI and AI technologies have been there for decades. So there have been professors and academics and tech people especially who have been working on it. And at the time, as the time kind of passed, we came to know that let AI do the menial task, all the repetitive work which is boring and which is something that humans can avoid to do. We'll all be artists, and we can all express ourselves, and we will paint and sing and dance, and unfortunately with DALL-E and other kind of similar tools, we've seen artists as at the forefront of kind of bearing the brunt of the use of artificial intelligence. So it's very, very peculiar, ironic, and these are very important questions, because if this kind of data that is already available and that has been done by so much of persistence and artistic aesthetic, if technology can kind of just mimic that in matter of microseconds, then what kind of response do we need from the lawyers and the policymakers? So it's absolutely of grave concern. Even AI music. In fact, my father sent me something really hilarious but worrying in the morning, that one movie was made with different artists, and with AI just faces were changed, and the same movie with absolutely different. And we've all seen on WhatsApp what is going around. And yeah, it's fair enough when we are just using it for laughs, but then it starts to get different different kind of shape in terms of deep fakes, in terms of kind of making sure that people are deceived intentionally with the cause of doing harm. And there are regulatory responses that are emerging to that. I'll quickly say that as well, that in the EU AI Act, for example, especially with deep fakes and with generative AI, which is generated online through artificial intelligence, you have to mark it clearly that this is AI generated. Now, whether people want to follow it, not follow it, then again, the question comes around the ethics of who's using it and for what purpose it is using it, and who's going to uphold, principles of transparency or principles of complete accountability to people. And again, we come to the question of duty. And quickly, I'll also react to what Merav said. Of course, the artificial intelligence generates amazing, efficient tools, and it's especially very interesting for the field of law, right? Because access to justice and knowing rights has been something that we can do better at, especially making sure that people at the last mile understand what the law is and how they can use it. So if AI can make legal information available at scale to people who don't usually have the means of understanding what and making sure the content is right, as you said, with accuracy, then it can be a game changer, because then you make sure that their education and the level of awareness that is needed for a functioning democracy is achieved with the use of AI. So that is my quick reaction to that the legal system and the lawyers and that practice could undergo shift, but if used wisely, shift for the better of the people as well. Thank you.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to respond to what you were saying about the people being up in arms about, from the creator's perspective, we must also remember that at every point in history, we've already had everyone having this mass hysteria about the introduction of new technologies. If we just look back at, the advent of photography, all of the fine artists were like, "This is the end. There will be no more paintings," we can never paint as realistic as a photographer can use a camera. So it should be outlawed. It cannot happen. And now look at today. We even have something called fine art photography. So it has really moved on. So I think we should try to educate artists to say that these are potentially new tools that you can use to really supercharge your creativity. Try not to look at it as theft. Even though I said there's very much this feeling of grand theft data, try to look at it as digital inspiration. It is an always on, digital co-pilot for you to communicate your ideas that you might not be able to use words to tell your client about what is inside your imagination. And with these tools, you can simply write out a prompt and then show. Show, don't tell, right, is the old adage. So try to look at these things as amazing tools instead. Let's also not forget, though, I absolutely agree with you on the front of deep fakes, terrifying what is available, amusing, yes, at the same time. Education is absolutely key to be able to then pick through, well, what is a deep fake? I recently did a presentation at Republic Poly in Singapore, and I had different images from history. One was a picture of Stalin, actually, and he was actually very famous for digitally enhancing his photos. He took away from an old photo a man who was holding his horse, because he didn't want anyone else to know that actually the horse was under the control. And it was actually, no, it's just Stalin on my special horse, and here I am, and I'm in control, and I'm amazing. But I also put up there the picture of the Pope. I don't know if you saw that one, in the big white puffer jacket. And the whole lecture room of 200 18-year-olds were completely flummoxed. They absolutely thought that picture of the Pope was absolutely real. So, it's going to be about educating people to be able to spot that deep fake. How we do that, again, more questions than answers right now. And then finally around bias, right? Like as Merav was saying, we have to remember that we all celebrated massively. Wow, goodness, in a week, ChatGPT got 100 million users. Isn't that amazing? But let's not forget the more than 3 billion people who do not have access to the internet, who their information is not there. I would very much like to see more cultural information so that we can generate images that have perhaps Laotian costumes. But if you type that in today, it won't probably be there. If we had more representation of culture on the internet, full stop, perhaps the outputs would just be a lot less biased and would be a lot more rewarding. So we're right at the beginning of this journey. Yes, there's a massive hoo-ha. There's always been fear at every advent of every new technology, but I think we should embrace it. And through frameworks like UNESCO have already got 193 nations to sign up to their ethical framework. The AI Act is coming in the EU. There are ways forward through the fear to enter into this brave new digital realm.
I'll just react on the comment regarding the arts and the creative world. There is so much intellectual property risk here because there's little transparency as to the data that is being used to train these tools, and as lawyers we have an obligation to guide our clients, to advise our clients, to follow the law, the rules, the regulations, and it's just very hard to deal with this issue of potential IP infringement and to be really able to use things that are being created by these generative AI tools. So something that we will need to deal with.
Absolutely. I think something that I think we are all going through is this tension between embracing something that's here and in my case, I mean, I'm a litigator, I am a partner in a law firm, so clients will want us to use artificial intelligence because it makes our work more efficient, it's cheaper for clients. There are a lot of things that used to be done by paralegals or junior lawyers, and now it can be done by machines, and it's great, and it's so fast. We can access documents, we can find information. It would be, I think, not wise, obviously, not to use it, and people will use it, so we have to do it. Now, the question is, how do we do it in a way that we are obviously respecting the law, but going a step further, this is about ethics too. You've probably all read this unfortunate incident at a federal court here in the US where a New York lawyer filed a brief that was generated by ChatGPT, and he was not familiar with how ChatGPT works, going to the education issue, and he thought it was, from what I understand, he thought it was something like Westlaw, LexisNexis, some sort of tool where you can find case law and it gives you information. It would be great if we had something that not only finds the case law, but reads it for you, interprets it for you, and applies it to the case and writes the motion. I mean, I don't know if it would be that great. Probably I would not have a job, but that's what this lawyer thought that would do or work. And when he filed that, turns out ChatGPT cited some cases, and as I said, that's what he thought. So it was filed. I mean, opposing party couldn't find the cases in Westlaw. Apparently the judge couldn't find either. I'm not trying to tell the story. It's out there in the press. What I'm trying to say is it was a big mess. And it was in part based on not knowing what artificial intelligence is and what ChatGPT or how it works. So one of the challenges I think all of us have mentioned is education. It's education in our jobs, in our fields, but it's also educating the public. These deep fakes, how it works, how you see it. It's so difficult, I think, to distinguish and to reach agreements on regulating how to do it, but also reach agreements how we educate our children, which is something that it is per se complicated, to try to identify this, distinguish, and make decisions. I would like to put one more thing on the table, which I think, Kay, goes to your point about creators, and my dad is a photographer. And so, back in the days, it used to be something that nowadays it's not. You were not able to take photographs with your phone. You had to, have equipment, and it was a thing. Now it's easy, right? And so I've kind of seen this fear of, oh my God, what's going to happen now? From what I understand and I see, I think humans have something that cannot be replaced, hopefully. And that human interaction, those skills, that engagement, that ability to convince others, to talk, to argue, to think, that's probably irreplaceable. And so maybe, in terms of education and in terms of our professions and our jobs and new creations, that human side, however it is, however we can find it, is more valuable than ever, because that's something that machines don't have. How we define that human portion, what it comes to be in the end, how we make it, distinct, and we educate our children on that, so we make sure they have those skills more than ever, considering that they are going to grow in a world more digital than ours. So in a world that if we want, we will not interact with anyone, and we will need those skills more than ever. So after this, I would like now to go into maybe some practical examples that you can provide based on your experience on maybe advantages we can start with that, or if you want to talk about problems directly, that's fine too. But something you've seen come across involving artificial intelligence and ethics, please.
Perfect, thank you. I'll react first to your comments. Often, we come up with examples which is like, people have to keep pace with newer technology and the changes that are coming. Encyclopedia Britannica is one example. Kodak and Sony music. I mean, people used to have Walkman, and now the whole idea to the new generation sounds quite hilarious that something like that used to exist. But I don't know, AI technology sounds a little different than the previous technologies in terms of the potential to do profiling, the potential to manipulate is higher, the potential risks to kind of, understanding how a human being would react to a certain situation, and kind of making sure that that behavior can also be tempered with before it happens. So in terms of the advantages, the technology that I really appreciate, AI already kind of making its inroads, is Google Maps. I really appreciate that it tells me where I should go. I love the fact that Grammarly corrects my sentences. It's also based on AI. I really like that my bank uses AI so that the fraud is detected and wrong transactions do not take place. So these things are extremely helpful, and as I was just reacting earlier, the legal tech and access to justice space also really benefits tremendously with the use of AI. But there are critical concerns, as I just mentioned. And to give concrete examples based on my own experience, as an educator, some of the things that we are concerned with right now is the use of ChatGPT in doing essays in the universities. And we are looking at softwares where we can detect if an essay has been written by a student using AI, but the softwares are not as good, and it doesn't come up with exact possibility or predictability of whether AI has been used or not. It is based on just the human judgment. So recently I was grading and I kind of sounded something very fishy with a certain answer, and I kind of checked whatever online tools were available, and the student had written it based on AI 80 to 100% based on different software. But we need to get better at all of this. This is a big concern in terms of an actual example that we are grappling with. We are asking different universities, what are you doing in terms of making sure that these kind of situations can be prevented ahead of the time. And one more quick example that I'm going to use is one of the projects that we are working with the Dutch police and the Dutch government, is where there's a multi-stakeholder coalition that is created around public safety and use of AI in how crowd behavior happens, or in terms of making sure that certain crime cannot escalate. Now, there are ethical questions related to this, and we look at this from the ethical perspective, and of course we can ask ourselves whether this should be done or not, but the fact is it is being done already, and making sure that people who have different perspectives, or the ethicists or academics or designers or tech people or private and public, they all kind of come together, civil society, citizens themselves, and try to see how we tackle this. So we really need more multi-stakeholder coalitions to talk about some of the concerns based on different areas. Could it be environment? Could it be public safety? Could it be education? Could it be crime? And the list goes. So maybe I'll just stop with my comment on the advantages and disadvantages here. Thank you.
Super fascinating. I think from a university perspective, there are thankfully developments, right? So Bard, if you use Bard instead of ChatGPT, it always now gives you one or two references at the bottom, just so that you can verify the information. And so if that's already happening now, hopefully we will get to more situations where we have more verified sources. Also then in an education setting, you need to, sorely from a lecturer's perspective, say, well, it's now more important than ever to back up your arguments using actual sources. So tell me, what is the URL of that source? Where did you find it from? ChatGPT and Bard and all these models are, though, however, enabling people to assimilate large amounts of information and make sense of it a bit more. At the same time, though, we need to make sure that these machines are not truth machines. They're just looking for patterns in data. So they're not knowledgeable in that sense. They do make mistakes, and they do have these hallucinations. So we need to make sure that students are equipped to be able to say, well, it is actually very important that I verify my sources. but I can use it as a tool to make sense of a lot more information that otherwise I would have had to spend ages doing multiple Google searches and trying to link it all together myself. From my perspective as a user, a daily user, we have been creating a virtual reality experience about the future of floating cities the future of human habitats in the face of rising sea levels. And so we created a floating city. And literally just by using Midjourney, we were able to use some very simple prompts and build upon all of the different outputs to then visualize what could a floating city based in Asia look like, and look at what could the energy system look like, what could the food system look like, what could the transport system look like. So we are using it on a daily basis to prototype ideas that we are then able to very quickly to put into Blender, for example, and recreate those 2D images and put them into 3D. Now, I perhaps might even not need to use that step because NVIDIA is already creating software where just from a simple 2D image, they can straight away create something in 3D. Which is, again, back to talking about, jobs and people of the future and how they're going to think about what they're going to be studying. Maybe that is going to put out, your father thinking about, but I'm going to be out of a job, as a photographer. Maybe all of the people who've spent a lot of time thinking about, I'm going to be a 3D modeler, also now suddenly think that they're out of a job because of this NVIDIA software. Having said that, again, if you can think about using it as a tool, the human at the center of that is going to be the one that can really create something astonishing as an output, rather than just relying on that little machine to tell you, hey, this looks like a good table or whatever it is. And secondly, I'm using it every day to create things like captions and social media calendars. It's really, really good at creating like a suggested calendar that would be super engaging for people to follow along in some of your projects. So it's an incredibly powerful tool, but yes, I think back to verification of sources and everything, it is coming. And so we have to hope that the people are going to create more plugins and that Bard's going to be better at bringing to the fore the actual sources that is, and to get us to that transparent moment of knowing what is this output and what is it actually based on.
Very quickly, I just want to react to the education part. As Katharine said, if you don't use it, somebody else is going to use it. So you better have to catch up yourself. And that's why we've decided for now that we'll just teach them how to use generative AI to write an answer. What prompt are you using, for example? And again, the question is, what jobs do we prepare them for? Because the jobs are going to demand the use of AI. So yeah, those are questions. Just quick reaction on that one.
Right. Some of the we've talked about advantages and challenges, and we would like to move now for the last minutes of this part of the panel to talk about potential solutions. It is, as we've said, very complicated. Some things are not about solutions. It's more about evolving and adjusting with, I think, this fear of losing jobs. And, I mentioned before, in line with my co-panelist, about human interaction, some skills that are just not replaceable. And what we are doing today right now, it would not be quite the same if it was a robot talking or some machine saying something. This is human. We are all here exchanging thoughts with a common goal. And I think in every, industry, field, job, if you want to put it that way, we've mentioned today, there is a human component. And that's probably more important than ever. I'm going to start with my own, but I want to, join when I was mentioning earlier about motions and briefs and my job and what I do. Very important part of what we do in my job is thinking, is strategizing, is presenting the knowledge in a way that comes through us, X, or we can convince a third party that our clients are right. We can, all that selection, that thinking process, all that human part of judgment, that's probably irreplaceable. How we present that, knowledge nowadays is everywhere and accessible by I'm not going to say everyone, because as you mentioned, Kay, there are billions of people who have no access to knowledge, unfortunately, and the way we know it now. But many of us, we do have it. And so it's about something else now. It's about how we process that knowledge. It's about how we present it, how we go through it, how we use it, if you want, right? And so that's one side, I think. And the other is government regulation. And we're going to have someone later very special to tell us a little bit about that. But it's something that it seems so wild that, you know, we may need to put some doors and some regulation to make it palatable and accessible to the common, you know, people. So solutions, what do you think about that?
In terms of the solution, I talked about the multi-stakeholder approach, that, you know, different people, including of different cultures, coming together and kind of discussing these issues together. That is one. Secondly, the whole movement around responsible AI is also an important one. Companies are coming up with different charters, putting up some of the values around what AI use in that company looks like. So with responsibility, inclusivity, impartiality in terms of addressing some of the biases, safety, fairness. So that is something that has to be encouraged. There is something also called AI impact assessment or something on those lines, which companies can kind of, in EU AI Act also it provides that, you know, there will be agencies which will check whether AI is being used responsibly in different organizations. So that is also a step in the right direction. And one solution I would say is to kind of have critical thinking, that, you know, that is something that we need to do in self-defense to the technology that is coming, and developing that in the younger population. Spending time offline and not trusting everything that we read is also an important one. And gathering in communities of, I mean, kind of going back to some of the old ways, maybe a good antidote to being a hyper online, hyper connected world. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I'll respond to some of the concepts that you raised with responsible AI. It really means, when you think about a large organization, right, thinking about how to engage with these tools, to really have an end-to-end framework, right, that is thinking about the entire life cycle of the development of these potential services or products. And like with any new emerging technology, you have to first acknowledge that the ultimate long-term value is still unclear, right? There are a lot of flaws. You have to test things very slowly, create testing environments, right? And loop in humans in the process for to monitor, right, how things are being done, and to ensure transparency and accountability and integrity and fairness and all these good concepts. I know that the EU Commission issued AI guidelines around some of these principles. So it is, I think, easier said than done, right? And you need to have a lot of stakeholders, as you mentioned, with a very large set of expertise, right? You need ethics specialists, lawyers, compliance folks, technical people, people who really understand the technology, finance. So really get all these views and be very thoughtful about how you go about the process and where exactly you include humans and make decisions.
I think we can also, solutions-wise, look to perhaps the rules of the road. If you think about machines, we're all driving around in our cars. These machines can be used just to simply get from one place to another, but also could absolutely be used to kill somebody else. So we have governments to then put rules of the road in place. We have responsible drivers who take tests before they're allowed to drive. They put on seat belts as well. But unfortunately, there are always going to be these bad actors, these crazies who just, I'm just going to drive my car like an idiot. So we have to always make sure that it is our collective responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility to keep the rules, to keep the roads safe. One thing I was heartened by is a really good article written by, I think it was the founding editor of Wired. It's called Engines of Wow, and I think you should look it up if you're interested at looking at things from the creator perspective. And he said, look, today, these machines need to be trained on hundreds of billions of images to actually put out something good. But in future, we have a vision that these machines could just be trained on maybe just a data set of 10,000 inputs to get some really amazing outputs. So in that scenario, could you imagine a time where we have infrastructure and a system in place where 10,000 amazing artists get to then say, oh, I want to be part of that machine. Please use my painting because I want to be training the good inputs so that we have a really great output out of this particular machine that deals with this vertical of, for example, just oil painting. So we will have many, many different machines for different verticals, and hopefully they can be trained on less data. And transparency is then key, because then we can identify that Katharine's amazing oil painting or your father's amazing photo was actually used to train the machine, and therefore there may be just compensation for you.
Excellent. I think it's now time maybe to open it to some comments from you. If you have any or questions from our panelists. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. You were discussing a couple of times about code-generated data in the field of art and among other things. To what extent I would have a right, part of it, either a right to stop, a right to have money out of that. And just want to mention that the American Law Institute and the European Law Institute, in their principles on the data economy, have put forward a whole part of code-generated data and a set of criteria that could be taken into account. Because of course, if I'm just one out of a million, I will have no right to whatever. But if you take for instance, smart tires, and I'm I'm a farmer on a big land. I have these smart tires on my tractor, and I provide essential data that are put with others that my contribution is essential. Then one would understand that on the ethical point of view, and of course unjust enrichment is based on ethics, I would have a right to be indemnified. So you were saying a lot is open, and indeed, but maybe one could look and take that into consideration, because as you will see, we try to have a number of criteria. And maybe a second point, we spoke about the mass of data, and you said in one night or whatever, all the data of Instagram were used. Now the question is, of course, do I, as an enterprise, for instance, have a right to access directly this pool of data? Is there a right for public administration to have an access to this pool of data, especially think of COVID, but of other issues when public interest is at stake? And here again, the American Law Institute and the European Law Institute have provided for some principles that we thought might work in these type of situations where there's a right to access. So just to mention that, because I think it might be useful also when we speak about ethical aspects. Do I have a right as a public administration? Do I have a right of indemnity because I'm just enrichment based on ethical issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely fair point, and thank you for sharing. I think from a creator's perspective, though, they are just watching feeling like they're having their jobs disappear, and then the implementation of these principles is coming when? When am I going to actually get some fair compensation for the use of my materials, right? And is it ever coming? And so, that's why we had a lot of artists going on the internet and saying AI banned and boycott it, etc. I think we need to get away from that sentiment. We need to educate creators that these are tools that can actually supercharge your creativity, but at the same time, we need to be very cognizant of the fact that the poor starving artist is still with us and is not going away, and the fact that these tools are existing means that that problem is only kind of compounding at the moment while we do not have the right infrastructure and systems in place to compensate them fairly.
Yes, sir.
I have a legal education question. So if we were to make a product like ChatGPT or Barrat and make it for legal research, would it be beneficial to have a limited knowledge base like ChatGPT to encourage skepticism within law students? Or would it be better to have a tool like Barrat that's connected to the internet? I'm just curious about that.
I don't know if
Are you saying that the tool should be just pre-trained and then not?
Yeah, so I wrote a paper on ChatGPT, and since I knew that it had a September 2021 cutoff, I could tell that it was hallucinating when I asked it questions about events past that date.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good thing. It encouraged my skepticism. It encouraged me to test this tool and to see the limits of it. And I was wondering maybe I wouldn't be able to do that with Barrat.
That's interesting. I haven't really thought about that angle. I think generally we want to make sure that these models are being updated and that we can actually use them reliably, right, over time. I mean, it's still early, but you definitely need to figure out ways to make sure that the information is still up to date and reliable, and continuously train these models. Because otherwise we will not be able to use them.
Can I quickly react to that?
Sure, of course.
Use of AI for legal research has been there previously as well, and there have been startups specifically focusing on this. I'm sure you know that as well. But they present such an unprecedented speed of doing legal research that was very threatening for law firms and lawyers, and they were kind of restricted to do that. But with ChatGPT, this is another potential. And to answer your question specifically between ChatGPT and Barrat, naturally, I mean, something which is more updated is more helpful for the law students. But at the same time, law and justice are very delicate field. And to have legal research specifically on something which is so updated and so current, we have to be very careful. But from the law students' perspective, the more updated the better, I don't know. Or if they just want to work with it, not connected to the internet as far as they are in the school, maybe.
Sir.
Michael Cooper, I'm the Executive Director of the American Society of International Law. I used to chair the House of International Affairs here. And a couple of years ago, I helped the University of Oxford see and launch a new institute on ethics in AI. So I was really happy to see the word ethics in the panel today, because I would argue that this AI challenge goes beyond a simple regulatory challenge, right? We're lawyers, we don't want to be
Yeah.
I think it goes beyond that. And for me, the question isn't really whether AI will be used for good or evil, because we know already it's going to be used for both. Right? It's already used for both. I mean, the social control structures that we see in China, George Orwell never could have imagined. But for me, I tried to think of this on an even higher level. Forgive me for going off in this direction, but I feel like we also need ethicists, we need philosophers, maybe even theologians in this room with us to think this through, because what we're creating is something that, first of all, it's eternal, right? Like, it lives forever. It's not going to die. It's going to keep growing and learning things. Like, I can only read so many books in my life or so many cases, but it's already read all the books and cases I've read, and newspaper articles, and all the ones that you've read. It's read everything that everybody in this room has read, and it's reading more every second. So it lives forever. It's omnipresent, right? Because it's in my watch, my phone, my car, my toaster. It's everywhere all at once. It's omniscient. It knows everything, or it will, maybe not today, but tomorrow, or 5 or 10 years from now. And so, when you think about creating an entity like that, or a being, if you call it that, it really troubles me, because it makes me think, for example, about the basis on which we recognize human rights, which is that we're the creative beings, or we're rational beings, and so we're higher than the other beings. But this thing's going to be higher than us, right? It's going to be smarter than us, live longer than us. So I'm not sure what my question is, but I think it's important that we consider, as we approach each of these ethical forks in the road, the best we can hope for is to make informed decisions on each of those forks. Because, again, I think it goes beyond a simple regulatory challenge. We're in another space of this going forward. So,
Absolutely.
But we will only get there if we let it. Don't forget, it will only be smarter than us or higher than us if we let it. And even if it has read all of the books, we don't actually know, because it's too opaque and not transparent. How much did it pay attention to The Colour Purple versus, the Simpsons comic? So, we just don't know. And back to what you were saying about, the inputs, it's very important to make sure that, there's a lot of junk on the internet, and unfortunately ChatGPT, even Barrat to a certain extent, is trained on a lot of junk. So that's why it's so important to get back to the verification. Where did this actually come from? Can we point the human being using this tool to the actual source of where this little idea might have come from? And I think that's really, really key.
Very quickly, to address your concern, I think it would depend on who has the kill switch. At the end of the day, and whether we can trust that person or persons or entity or algorithm, I don't know. And that is indeed, I don't know. These are big questions. And yesterday I was reading Isaac Asimov's 3 laws that he devised. That the machine shall cause no harm to the human, and the second one is that you can't go against the second. So it's fairly logical structure that at the end of the day, machine will act as per what the human says, will never harm the human, and will always protect the first law in case of a conflict or something like this. So yeah, maybe we kind of go back to something as basic as that. Perhaps the answers are in basic human instincts and intuition and theology also maybe.
It's, I think, important to still remember that humans are still in the process and developing these tools, right? So it's not like this monster that is taking on these books and information and becoming smarter than me. There are teams, there are labs, there are people around it that are baking information into it and teaching it and testing it and playing around with it. And everyone's eyes are, on this. So regulators all over the world, and there's just so much also excitement. There's also fear, but I think that it's good that it got so much attention now, so that hopefully we can do the right thing and put it on the right track, so that we can use it for our purposes and not for bad. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're running out of time now. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you to the 3 of you for this wonderful comments and for sharing with us all your experience and thoughts. Now we're going to have a few words from Rodolfo Tesone, and remember that then we're going to have a closing speech by Carme Artigas Brugal, who is Spain's Secretary of State for Digitization and Artificial Intelligence. So stay with us, and thank you very much. We're going to now move, I think, thank you.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias, Katharine. Voy a utilizar el español, que es lengua cooficial de la asociación, de la World Jurist Association. En nombre del Consorcio Internacional por los Derechos y las Libertades Digitales, que aglutina a una serie de operadores del sector legal, del entorno digital, hasta 150 entidades que en estos momentos estamos empujando a la Carta de Derechos Digitales y a la cultura de todo lo que son los derechos digitales, quería enviar mi más sincero agradecimiento, en primer lugar, a la World Jurist Association por haber contado con nosotros para este congreso tan relevante. cómo no, a su presidente Javier Cremades, a su vicepresidenta Vivian Reding, que la hemos tenido en sala hasta hace bien poquito, y también quería agradecer personalmente el privilegio y el poder contar, en este caso, con la secretaria de Estado de Inteligencia Artificial y Digitalización de España, Carme Artigas, que es una de las pioneras, de las personas que con mayor empuje está liderando el desarrollo de los derechos digitales en ese entorno digital. Así que para nosotros es un absoluto privilegio, Carme, tenerte hoy entre nosotros. Enhorabuena además a la World Jurist Association por el 60 aniversario. Yo creo que es una efeméride lo suficientemente relevante como para poder hacer un alto el camino, como para poder apretar el botón de pausa y entre todos tratar de hacer un ejercicio de perspectiva histórica para entender que en estos momentos lo que está en juego y lo que pretendemos defender, se ha dicho hoy en la ceremonia inaugural, es la paz. ¿Quiénes de los presentes no queremos la paz? Creo que todos queremos la paz. Ahora bien, como juristas, como abogados, desde el minuto 1 nos han enseñado que para que haya paz tiene que haber convivencia, y para que haya convivencia tienen que haber normas, tienen que haber leyes y tiene que haber un ordenamiento jurídico. Sin esas normas iguales para todos y sin ese ordenamiento jurídico, difícilmente se va a poder garantizar el derecho a la tutela judicial efectiva, difícilmente vamos a poder garantizar esa convivencia y, por lo tanto, es fundamental que para el desarrollo de esta nueva sociedad digital realmente empecemos a recodificar el ordenamiento jurídico tal cual lo conocemos. Desde un punto de vista de las tecnologías disruptivas que están por venir, desde el fuego, pasando por la rueda, la imprenta, la máquina de vapor, hasta incluso la energía atómica y ahora la inteligencia artificial, que es de lo que se ha hablado en este panel por parte de mis ponentes predecesores, evidentemente se puede adoptar esas tecnologías o bien para beneficios o bien para soluciones o puede acarrear una serie de riesgos o una serie de retos que tenemos que afrontar. Lo que sí está claro es que de cómo regulemos esta nueva tecnología vamos a tener unos frutos u otros. Es evidente, como se ha venido comentando en el panel precedente, que hay diferentes casuísticas en cuanto a que la inteligencia artificial ya está suponiendo auténticas ventajas para la sociedad. Si, por ejemplo, miramos en diagnóstico por la imagen en medicina, está salvando vidas hoy en día, pero sin embargo, en el otro lado, estamos en una guerra a las puertas de Europa, donde si juntamos inteligencia artificial con la industria militar, el problema puede ser evidentemente incontrolable. Y ahora sí que me gustaría, como jurista, hacer alusión a uno de los padres de la cultura libre en Internet. Es el señor Lawrence Lessig, asesor de Obama en la administración en la Casa Blanca en su día, y él ya comentaba que en el mundo de Internet quien programa es quien regula, es quien legisla. Lamentablemente en estos momentos, en lo que es el contexto del entorno digital, quien está programando, quien es el dueño de esas plataformas en las que todos estamos dedicando nuestro tiempo y nuestra vida digital, finalmente es quien tiene la soberanía. De forma que en estos momentos la verdadera soberanía no recae en el pueblo, no recae en el ciudadano, sino que recae en esos grandes señores feudales, en esas grandes multinacionales que están en estos momentos en un tablero de juego global desregulado. Ese es el motivo por el cual, si hacemos ahora mismo un análisis de los grandes cambios que han habido a lo largo de la historia de la humanidad, nos daremos cuenta de que han habido grandes cambios a partir de conquistas, a partir de grandes movimientos migratorios, incluso a partir de grandes revoluciones. Pues bien, este es el primer momento en la historia de la humanidad donde han confluido esos tres grandes elementos que generan cambios en la historia de la humanidad en una horquilla de tan solo 5, 10 o 15 años como mucho. Por lo tanto, ante esa situación y teniendo en cuenta las tecnologías disruptivas que están por llegar, como inteligencia artificial, robótica, metaverso, neurotecnología, biotecnología, nanociencia, como la realidad virtual o la realidad aumentada, como el Big Data, Cloud Computing, blockchain, objetos y materiales inteligentes, vehículos autónomos, etcétera, 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 ante eso, ¿quién es el bueno que se atreve a pronosticar cómo estaremos dentro de 5 o 10 años? Por lo tanto, estamos en un contexto de incertidumbre que lo que tenemos que hacer es anticiparnos, ser responsables y, por lo tanto, tratar de evitar que esas consecuencias negativas de todas estas tecnologías disruptivas de forma separada o en su conjunto de forma fusionada puedan generar problemas que sean de carácter irreversible. Así que no estamos en una época de cambios, sino que estamos en un cambio de era. Y para este nuevo cambio de era, los abogados lo que decimos es que la persona tiene que estar en el centro del desarrollo tecnológico. Es lo que se ha venido a llamar el humanismo tecnológico y que no podemos ser tratados ni como mercancía ni como producto. Tenemos que ser tratados como sujetos de derechos y de obligaciones. Y la soberanía, también en el entorno digital, debe recaer sobre las personas. No podemos resolver conflictos jurídicos globales con jurisdicciones estatales y no podemos resolver conflictos digitales con un ordenamiento jurídico y con una administración de justicia del siglo pasado. Por lo tanto, tenemos que replantear el contrato social de Rousseau. Tenemos que adecuar el pacto social a ese nuevo entorno digital. Tenemos que garantizar la separación de poderes de Montesquieu. No puede ser que en una única plataforma con una posición de abuso dominante en el mercado recaiga el poder legislativo, recaiga el poder ejecutivo y recaiga también a la vez el poder judicial. Por lo tanto, planteamos y defendemos una recodificación del ordenamiento jurídico basada en normas y basado en principios y valores que contienen las cartas de derecho digital. Si miramos por el retrovisor, nos daremos cuenta de que en momentos trascendentales de la humanidad, como la Revolución Francesa, los juristas dimos un paso al frente y proclamamos la Declaración de los Derechos del Hombre y del Ciudadano. En otro momento trascendental, y es cuando nace la World Jurist Association, durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial, proclamamos la Declaración Universal de los Derechos Humanos. Nosotros lo que decimos es que ante este nuevo entorno digital y en la nueva era que está a punto de empezar, tenemos que proclamar hoy, aquí y ahora, y lo digo de manera solemne, creo que es el mejor momento y en el mejor sitio para decirlo, tenemos que proclamar la Carta de Derechos Digitales, impulsarla y desarrollarla, para apuntalar el concepto de humanismo tecnológico. Algunos venimos desde hace ya más de 15 años defendiendo esos derechos, inicialmente con la Declaración de Cádiz del 2011, que fue la primera declaración en la Unión Europea en el contexto del bicentenario de la primera Constitución española de 1812, donde proclamamos esa declaración de defensa de los derechos. A continuación han habido muchísimas iniciativas, pero en este caso la Carta de Derechos Digitales de España, que ha sido pionera a nivel mundial, donde hemos liderado, y digo hemos porque contar aquí con una de las precursoras, la verdad que ha sido pues quien ha empujado desde el minuto cero pues el que hoy pueda ser una realidad la Carta, no solo la Carta española, sino también la Declaración de Derechos y Principios Digitales de la Unión Europea o la Carta Iberoamericana de Principios y Derechos en Entornos Digitales, ha sido en gran parte gracias a la iniciativa, al empuje y al trabajo de la Secretaría de Estado. Así que eso hay que reconocerlo. Ahora bien, ¿es suficiente? No, no es suficiente porque estamos, como decía antes, en un tablero de juego global donde tenemos que conciliar entornos, culturas, sociedades y puntos de vista desde otras perspectivas, teniendo en cuenta pues, la zona asiática, teniendo en cuenta África o teniendo en cuenta otros contextos que van más allá del contexto geográfico occidental y que los tenemos que integrar dentro de la cultura en la que estamos. Por lo tanto, tenemos que considerar que para la Unión Europea y en concreto para la zona iberoamericana, la Carta de Derechos Digitales es una ventaja, no es un inconveniente. No es un inconveniente, es una ventaja. De forma que si somos conscientes de que tiene que ser nuestro principal elemento competitivo, nuestro principal elemento diferenciador para que todos quieran vivir en un entorno digital donde se garantice sus derechos, ese es el camino que tenemos que seguir. Y para eso hemos venido aquí a la World Jurist Association para firmar un convenio de alto nivel entre el consorcio, con el apadrinamiento de la Secretaría de Estado y con el presidente Javier Cremades, para el impulso de una hoja de ruta que tiene definida muy claramente un rumbo donde sabemos cuáles van a ser las siguientes acciones en forma de dinámicas de concienciación, de sensibilización, de empoderamiento, toda la parte de difusión y de educación en derechos digitales, toda la parte formativa y capacitativa a nivel profesional, a potenciar al máximo las relaciones institucionales entre todos los stakeholders que forman parte del ecosistema y, por último, tenemos que ser conscientes de que lo que se requiere es velocidad, velocidad y velocidad. Al tiempo que nosotros estamos discutiendo y estamos pensando y filosofando, nos encontramos con que las tecnologías van a una vertiginosa velocidad de propagación y, por lo tanto, no nos podemos dormir. Así que acción, transformación y buena letra. Espero que el Congreso Internacional, el Congreso Mundial del Derecho en el que nos encontramos, donde están los principales líderes, los principales expertos y yo creo que los principales referentes sobre la materia, pueda ser un antes y un después para que dentro de unos años podamos mirar por el retrovisor de la historia y podamos decir que hoy hemos hecho historia. Así que gracias a todos y paso la palabra a Carme Artigas.
Muchísimas gracias. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to this World Jurist Association in order to contribute to share our vision on a rights-oriented and human-centric digital transformation, as Adolfo has already so well introduced. We have just seen the previous forum when you have discussed all the issues around AI regulation. I just want to brief a little bit on what has been the background until we have come to this point. Already in year 2020, Spain was very vocal in proposing for the first time, this Charter of Digital Rights and encouraging I would say, the change of mindset that technology, especially artificial intelligence, should be regulated. I can share that we felt very alone. We felt that we were preaching in the desert. Nobody wanted to listen to that. At that point of time, AI that had started the second wave after the long winter, especially around 2014, with the deep learning emergency and the new capacity of cloud computing. There were two models of AI evolution, very clearly marked. One led by the US, where data is in the hands of the big companies that have access to that personal data just by consent. And the Chinese model, where data is in the hands of the government that is being used by government civilians. And Europe was in the middle watching these two development models and saying, I don't like this wave. I don't like wave one, wave two. I want to have a third way. And the third way is I don't want data to be in the hands of the companies. I don't want data to be in the hands of the governments. I want the data to be in the hands of the citizens. And then we are responsible of what are the allowed uses for data and first and third party data. Remember the Cambridge Analytica issues. There were nothing illegal. It was just third party non-consent, I would say, giveaway of that data. We want to participate in the limits and in the governments. So we cannot think about regulating AI without regulating data. And Spain was leading at an international level the first law around data protection. That was the Ley Orgánica de Protección de Datos, the OEPD, that inspired the GDPR. We were also the first country allowing for the right to be forgotten, which is, remember, was the right that involves that Google needs to erase all your tracked data. And we have been the first country in the world regulating algorithm transparency in the Riders Law. The Riders Law is the law that is regulating the gig economy, the delivery platforms. So we introduced the concept of algorithm transparency in the relationships between employees and employers. So when an algorithm is defining my task, is evaluating my task, that criteria, that algorithm should be transparent. Okay, these are examples only that we are in an era that for the first time ever we're trying to regulate technology. Technology has never been regulated, not in the previous revolutions. And also you have mentioned the AI Act. Europe was the first starting AI regulation, so a framework when we can regulate artificial intelligence. Starting already in 2019, and now, these days, just precisely yesterday, Alberto, my team here, was attending the first trialogue in the European Union, where Spain, as leading the EU Council, we have the commitment to finish this data dossier, which is the AI Act. And we have an urge to do that, because we have been working for the last 4 years, and now after generative AI has emerged, the rest of the world has had this eureka moment, and now they realize, oh my God, we need to regulate this. And we say, welcome to the club. at last. Okay, so now we are in a very important time because everybody has realized that technology in the hands of the bad guys is very terrifying, but without control, without launching products without control, is also very harmful for people, and it can have even existential risk for humankind, something that didn't have the previous technologies. For the first time ever, technology can think. Technology can replace the human being in very human-like activities, and this is why this technology is different to any other technology revolution. So I think in this context, when we're thinking on how is the right way to do so, we are seeing now that, for example, American industry is trying to establish for themselves an ethic code of conduct. Okay. Also, the European Union is trying to propose a code of conduct for generative AI, and the AI Act is trying to regulate not the technology by itself, but the harmful uses of technology. So, a risk matrix-based regulation, only regulation the high-risk cases. But at the end of the day, the way we achieve the target doesn't matter. What the important thing is, what do you want to preserve? What rights are we protecting? And this is why the Charter of Digital Rights set up the basis for this. We want it to be universal agreement of what are the digital rights or what are the human rights in the digital age. So whatever regulation we put in a place or another, the way we achieve that result, it's less important that to preserve digital rights. And I want to talk about rights because principles are good, ethics are good. You were talking about ethics in AI. I was just myself last week in Paris with the UNESCO talking about ethics in neurotechnologies. I want to just put a deep dive on that a little bit more. But ethics are good. We can regulate based on ethics, on principles, but we must regulate based on rights because rights generate guarantees and rights generate accountability. So the effort we do together with 18 experts, where Rodolfo, we had the privilege to participate on that, and they have been appointed as the assigned consortia to promote internationally the Charter of Digital Rights, is because for the first time ever, we said, this is what we want to preserve. So we're not trying to get a legal standard, not even a technical standard. We want to establish a moral standard. What will be acceptable by society, will be acceptable by consumers, what will be acceptable by citizens, that can be done with my data, with artificial intelligence, but tomorrow with neurotechnologies, quantum computing, or synthetic biology. Because this challenge not only applies to AI. And I always say, and it's something that you're also dealing with in this exceptional Congress, we are a transition generation between two revolutions, an industrial revolution that doesn't longer exist, that doesn't longer work. All the governance tools that we have created for the Industrial Revolution do not work anymore. That was based on an industrial model that was exhausting raw materials, was polluting the environment, the society was in a different type of organization. But we have a new model based on data, based on intelligence, based on concentration of power and geopolitics, based on national agents and even non-Asian nation agents. Cybersecurity is in the heart of any national defense strategy. But that is not yet built, and we are in between. So we are a transition generation, and we need to solve two important problems for the next generation, for these kids, for these adolescents, that if we do not do it right, we won't have a second chance. The first one is to solve once for all the climate change and the sustainability of our planet, and for that we need technology. Without technology, you cannot move from the existing patterns to a circular economy. But the second important challenge is solve once for all the ethical issues and conflicts associated with digital and with technology transformation, with disruptive technologies. If we do not solve it, the harm we are creating to the next generation, to the people, to their mental health, all the existential issues we have on privacy, we won't have a second chance to revert back the harm we're going to create. So it's the first time where we can say that it's important to have a right balance between ex ante and ex post regulation. We just not let technology flow and launch to the market products that are not finished, like ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is not a product, was an R&D, and the best in case was a beta. But they were launching this with a beta, with a saying it was a beta, and it was launching a car without airbags or without brains. Why are we not asking the software industry the same controls and the same quality assurance processes. We are doing with the, I would say, pharmaceutical industry or with the car industry. We have been used to allow the software industry launch the products, and then we break it, and then we solve it, and we do the quality control ourselves, avoiding a lot of money for the industry if they had to do it beforehand. But of course, that has allowed the level of innovation we have of the industry. So we need to really think again, think twice, what are these controls? An example. I'm very concerned about neurotechnologies, and we are going to make. Now these days, Elon Musk has launched Neuralink. Neuralink, for the first time, is having FDA approval for a clinical test. But nobody knows what this clinical test is about. It's not registered in the clinicaltest.gov. Nobody knows what this is about. So we are now on time to solve these issues forever. We don't solve it, the harm, we cannot revert back. So the Charter of Digital Rights tries to create the right framework to see whatever technology comes, because now we know this too, but I'm going to guarantee that these rights are protected. So the Charter of Digital Rights has 6 categories. It's 25 rights specified in 6 categories. Rights to freedom, equality rights, rights of participation in the public space, rights related to work and business environment, digital rights in specific environments, in particular artificial intelligence and neurotechnologies. And that introduces, so really the international discussion we had, because as I mentioned later, we started at the national level, but we have elevated the discussion at international level, is say, first exercise was, how do I translate the rights I enjoy in the offline world to the online world? Well, how do I reinterpret the right of freedom of speech, the right of intimacy, right of privacy, at what extent an ironic comment in Twitter is just an ironic comment in Twitter or a real threat in real life? So all these things, what is, media press, freedom, all these things were good with that the exercise, but then we realized that we need to claim for new rights, because new technologies poses new risk scenario that require new rights, specifically in the areas of artificial intelligence and neurotechnologies. An example of the previous rights of freedom. For example, right to the digital heritage. What happens when I die with all my digital profile, the data that the big tech companies are stored? Do they need to delete it? They can keep it for their pattern recognition, machine learning algorithms, or they have the obligation to delete that from the training data sets. That's an example. The right to pseudo-anonymity. I don't need to be tracked all the time. I don't need to be microsegmented. I want to have certain level of anonymity that, of course, I can be tracked after that with a pseudo-anonymity concept. That means if you do something wrong, we know who you are, okay? So there are many examples. Right to education, right to connectivity. This is a right, otherwise we are increasing the digital divide. But on the specific topics on AI, we are claiming, for example, the right not to be discriminated by an algorithm, or the right for a second human opinion when an automated decision is preventing me certain loan or a certain medical treatment, because this is happening and this is going to happen more broadly. So the automated decisions based on AI can prevent me from having access to services, a social benefit, a grant, and that would require that we can ask for a second human opinion, or at least explainability of that decision. And in particularly on the neuro rights, we are very concerned on the treatment of brain wave data, what we call neuro data. We want to claim the right not to be augmented in your capacities, the right not to be altered in your own will, the right of an opinion, which is a fundamental right. Right of opinion is a fundamental right, and that can be altered by neurotechnologies. So the challenge of neurotechnologies is that traditionally neurotechnologies have been invasive neurotechnologies, and therefore they have been regulated as medical devices or medical treatment under the ethical codes of the hospitals. But now you can have the same effect with non-invasive neurotechnologies, with earphones or with a whatever headset, and that is the range of thing. So we are claiming that neuro data is not treated as any other biometric data. So my fingertip says that I'm Carme Artigas, but it doesn't define who I am. My pulse that I get from a bracelet from Google or whomever, the paths, my blood test, are not interfering in my being. but by neurodata decide what I think, what is my opinion, and who I am. So our position is that we should regulate the treatment of neurodata beyond the current treatment of health data. That health data neurodata is not just another biometrical data, and that we should treat them as a human organ, and therefore ban completely the commercialization of human organs, because otherwise you can really consider fake news as a joke, because anybody can use your brain, your electric pulse to alter your brainwave data and ask and make you buy this in Amazon or vote this party. So this is has a very important existential threat. So I think that is the time when we start regulating based on rights. And those rights must be guaranteed regardless of the technology we develop. So that is the work we've done. That is how vocal Spain is doing in elevating these discussions at a maximal level. So as he has already reminded us, we started with a national charter, then that inspired the Declaration of Principles and Values of the European Union. Then we organized the Digital Ministers Conference in the OECD in Canary Islands, where we managed to get a declaration that before 2 years' time there is an official recommendation for all the OECD members. We have signed the Ibero-American Declaration of Rights and Principles in Digital Environments, and we are working with United Nations, both the human rights and I've just come from the UX Tech Envoy, to have a sort of international governance agency. Spain is going to be the first country in the world having a national supervision agency on AI. It's already approved. It will be launched before the end of this year. And we're also leading the AI sandbox of the European Union. So we are really testing the technologies based on the future regulation. And we are combining together legislators and practitioners to decide how we make those rules practical, because otherwise people will not adopt it immediately. They will take 2 years, and they will more 2 years without control. So I think that is important, that we have this international agency in the same way we had the Atomic Energy International Agency, and that we can do it as soon as possible. It's the first time we see an interest from China also in regulating AI. They are starting to regulate deepfakes because that's very invasive in the social scoring strategy they have. But they are also thinking about AI governance mechanisms. I think this is not only a first world problem, I think it's also a third world problem in emerging societies and in developing countries. And I think it's the right time to put that into a priority at international level and consensus. And that the World Jurist Association is also doing an important role to translate these principles in real legal action. And that, as the motto of these days you are claiming, we are able to develop societies that are based by the rule of law and not by the rule of force. So thank you very much for allowing us to share that vision. And I think that we are living very, very decisive times. And as I mentioned, how successful we are defining really the world of the next generation. So thank you very much for your time.